This is a video tutorial on the weekly reading journal entries. So when you come into our Blackboard site, over here on the left, you're going to click on the Assignments tab. And when you click on the Assignments tab, it's going to show you this right here, the guidelines and sample for the weekly reading journal entries. And if you click on this document right here, it's a PDF, that's going to open up the guidelines, and that's on the first page. And then if you scroll down, here is a sample reading journal entry that a former student from another class posted that I think provides a really solid example of what you need to do for your entries each week. So let's go ahead and we will go over this document first, and then I'll show you where you go to upload your journal entry every week. So one thing you might notice right off the bat is apply, apply, and apply it. Your reading journal is your opportunity every week after you read and you reflect on the material. Then it's your opportunity to apply the learning to in a written format. So something that's really important is that every week you are going to read a chapter in Brown and Keeley's book, Asking the Right Questions. And so this book is intended to either teach you or to kind of help you brush up on your critical thinking skills. This content is not what you are going to summarize or what you're going to write about. You're going to read about a skill, and then you're going to apply that particular skill or what you're learning to the material that you read in James Crone's book, How Can We Solve Our Social Problems, to other course readings like articles, or next week I'm going to post another chapter to a book that I used to teach with, and to videos. So I cannot emphasize enough that you are going to apply the tools that you learn about in asking the right questions to the material that you're reading in How Can We Solve Our Social Problems. And so let's see here, I have another little, disclaimer. Do not summarize the material in asking the right questions. You're going to apply it. Each one of your journal entries is going to include and clearly label the three-part structure that I have outlined down here. And then one other thing is that your entries are due to Blackboard every week by Thursday at 11:59 p.m. So basically before the clock strikes 12 on Thursday night, make sure that you've done all of your reading, you've watched the videos, and you've given yourself enough time to write your journal entry and post it to Blackboard. So here is the three-part structure, and you are actually literally going to type this out. Part 1, summary of argument, and then you are going to summarize the arguments that are presented in either Crone's book or the arguments that are presented this week. You are reading an article in the Fresno Bee on slum housing. Last week you watched Inequality for All. You watched a film called The Line. So you are summarizing the arguments that are presented in those readings. So here are some questions that you can ask yourself. What is the author trying to convince me of? And so I'm going to come over here to Crone's text. And this week, one of the sections that you're reading is How Can Sociologists Address Social Problems and Yet Remain Objective? And so there's a debate in the world of sociology, and there are various camps or various philosophical ideas about the role of sociology and the role that sociologists should play in addressing social problems. And so, on the one hand, you have some sociologists that say that sociologists should remain objective. And so, they should use the scientific method in order to conduct research that is objective, in order to provide information to, let's say, policymakers. We're working with Faith and Community and the Lowell CDC this semester. And so some argue that sociologists should use the scientific method, should use research in an objective way to provide information to folks like Faith and Community and the Lowell CDC and to policymakers. And they should take that information after it's been objectively collected, and then they can use that research in order to affect change. And so there's various, groups that operate on a continuum, and all the way on the other end of the spectrum, you have sociologists, some that you'll read about in here, like Karl Marx, Jane Addams, W.E.B. Du Bois, and I've also provided those on that PowerPoint that's available in Blackboard. And so you've got these early founders of American sociology that feel that, the role of sociology is not just to uncover social problems, but in fact, it is the sociologist's responsibility to apply that social research, to apply that sociological knowledge in order to affect change and address those social issues. And so the article that you also read last week also talked about, the various types of sociology that exist. And so here you have, Crone in this section of the book, he's presenting an argument. There is a debate that is going on. And so, Crone is a sociologist, and he talks about where he falls in terms of that continuum. And so what you would want to do over here, right, in part one, if you decided that that's what you wanted to focus on, that's one of the arguments that you could summarize. You could say, Crone argues that there's a debate going on in sociologists, and that various sociologists, on the one hand, they believe ... and you'd keep going. And on the other hand, they believe ... and you'd keep going there. And so that would be one, and I'm going to highlight here. It says, have no more than 5 key points and no fewer than 3. And so that would be one of the key arguments that Crone is presenting in that very first chapter. And then I'm going to go back over to the text. He says right here, he says, well, there's some common ground, right? There's some common ground among sociologists that we can all stand wherever you are on that debate. And he lists out 5, right? At least 5 areas where there's some common ground. And so if you were writing about that this particular week, then that could be another 1 or 2 points that you might include in this particular area, right? What are the reasons that he or she gives? One of the reasons that Crone gives, that sociologists argue for why we should remain objective, is because, let me go back over to the text, is because that if we do not remain objective, then we can fall into a problem of kind of revealing right here. The result would be that sociologists would be seen as just another interest group with its own vested interests. And so that could be one of the arguments, or it is one that Crone presents, for why sociologists should remain neutral or objective. However, there's something missing from that, and that's where that critical thinking has to come into play. And so, just to recap, in part 1, what you're doing is you're summarizing the arguments. So if you were going to summarize some of the arguments from the Fresno Bee's special investigation into slum housing, wow, right here in the title of this article, it says, that there are Fresno apartments that are crawling with mice and roaches, but fearful tenants stay quiet. And so the Fresno Bee is making an argument that the reason why tenants don't report is because they're fearful. Who are they fearful of? Well, maybe when you're reading in this article, it may be stated what they are fearful or who they are fearful of, or maybe it is implied. And so sometimes it's not always overtly or directly stated, and you have to read between the lines. And so here, right, as another one of your 5 points or 3 points, you might write about what are the arguments that are presented in that Fresno Bee article, and what is the evidence or the reasons that are provided. Definitely, use a few key details, maybe some statistics in this particular section. In part 2, this is where you're going to react. So again, you're going to type up, right, part 2, personal reaction, and you are going to be responding to what you presented in this part 1. So there's lots of other stuff in Crohn's book. There's lots of other stuff in, the housing article. But if you didn't present it as an argument and provide some reasons here, then it should not be talked about in part 2. So you're responding to, you are reacting to at least 2 points that you presented in this first part. You are taking a stance. Do you agree? Do you disagree? With the arguments that have been presented. And most important, state why. Why do you agree? Which of the solutions, later on, Crone is going to get into some solutions to social problems. Which of the solutions do you find most compelling? Which do you agree with? Maybe there's some that you disagree with. Is the evidence credible? You're evaluating the evidence that has been presented in all of the readings. And this is one of the key critical thinking skills that you're going to learn about in the book, Asking the Right Questions. Use I statements, right? This is your personal stance, your personal evaluation or critique of the arguments that have been presented this week. Always tell how you feel about a certain issue and always explain why you feel that particular way. Provide a rationale, provide justification that is grounded in research and evidence. And we'll be, looking in asking the right questions. You'll be learning some skills about how do you evaluate evidence to know if it's credible or not. In part 3, what you're doing right here is a personal reaction and application to your service learning. So it's a little bit different from part 2 up here. What you're doing is looking at what was the one most important, helpful, or interesting thing that you read about in these particular readings. Why was it important? And what meant the most to you? Why? And you're connecting it to your service learning experience. So I know you haven't gone out into the field yet, but like I told you, the housing article is intended to start giving you a foundation and some background information about the service learning work that we're going to do. So even though you haven't gone out into the field, you do have some information. How do you feel about, slum housing? Is this the first time that you're hearing about this? One of the things that you're going to read about this week in Asking the Right Questions is this weak sense versus strong sense critical thinking. So this is like one of the skills that you are developing that you're going to kind of apply to the other material. And so with weak sense, what you're doing is you're using critical thinking in order to defend your currently held beliefs. On the other hand, strong sense critical thinking is when you use the skills to evaluate the claims and beliefs, especially your own. And so maybe, you have come into contact with this crisis in housing, this slum housing problem, and you've got some particular beliefs about it. Well, put those beliefs on the back burner and try to evaluate the arguments as much as possible without taking a position right away. So one other thing I do want to mention, this is the part 3, the most important thing and how it applies to your service learning, And then here I want you to read over this sample entry so that you can see how this student did a particularly good job of breaking down each of the parts and applying, the material, reacting to it, and then here, what was the one most important thing and how did it apply to their particular service learning experience? And so then after you write up your journal entry, make sure you do it on a Word document and you save it for your own records. And then you're going to come over here to reading journal entries, and you are going to click right here, right, for the journal entry instructions and to submit your journal entry. You're going to create your journal entry, give it a title. So we'll just do journal entry number 1. This is ARQ number 1, and this is also Crone number 1, and so that's a little basic one. Then you're going to paste your journal entry into this text box. Now you've already written it on a Word document. You're going to copy it. You're going to paste it from there. See, here's an option to attach a file. Do not attach a file. I've got 100 students and it's very time consuming for me if I have to open up and download each one of those. So do not attach it. Paste it into this text box, and then you're going to post, click right here on this little blue tab, and you're going to post your entry. So that is an overview of the weekly reading journal entries, and you'll be having your very first one starting this week.